We're out here on the West Coast about to tick another box on our bucket list.
San Francisco.
We're staying on the Coast Guard base in Petaluma, California, and as usual, we'll give you a quick tour of our RV accommodations a little later on in the video, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But now we're going to head out to San Francisco and start exploring the city. We're going to make sure we hit the Golden Gate Bridge, take a ferry out to Alcatraz, see some of the big redwoods, and get in a good hike and just play around in the city and take it all in.
It's going to be fun, so let's get to it.
For our visit to San Francisco, we stayed at the Coast Guard base in Petaluma, California, which is only about a 45-minute drive away. And like we said in the intro, we'll be sure to give you a tour of our RV accommodations a little later on in the video. But for now, we're going to check out what we came here for, San Francisco. And we're going to start with the iconic Golden Gate Bridge, which we are on right now. We were pretty excited to drive over this thing, but we're going to get a much better view of it in just a minute. While we're driving over it, here are a few fun facts about this bridge you may not have known. The Golden Gate Bridge took over 4 years to construct, from January 1933 to May 1937. The cost to build it was $35 million in the 1930s, which would equate to more than $1.5 billion today. The length of the suspension span is 1.2 miles, but the total length is 1.7 miles, which includes the approaches. The height of the tower above the water is 746 feet, and the height of the tower above the roadway is 500 feet. And the weight of the bridge, not counting the concrete anchorages, is 840 million pounds. That's heavier than the Empire State Building. And by the way, here's that better view. And you know we walked across it too. The streets of San Francisco really are very hilly, like all of them, seriously. You could skip leg day at the gym and just go for a walk and get the same results, which tells me that San Franciscans must have the best legs and asses in the world. I might just move here. The streets are also filled with little pockets of mystery and surprises and just cuteness. And by the way, if you're wondering who that man in the video is, that's our friend Steve. He lives here and was very generous with his time and showing us around. Thanks, Steve. You're the best. Here we're at the top of Russian Hill with another great view. And on your right is the Transamerica Pyramid Building, no doubt the most recognizable building in San Francisco. So now we're headed to San Francisco's Chinatown. You can't visit a city that's home to one of the largest Chinatowns in all of the US and not go check it out. So we're going to take you on a drive through it. San Francisco's Chinatown is jam-packed with restaurants, retail stores, and markets. The streets are tight, it's very busy, and as you can probably imagine, parking is a nightmare, and especially when you're driving a truck. To be fair though, parking was pretty much a nightmare everywhere we went. Having said that, if we didn't have the dogs with us, we would have somehow, some way, found somewhere to park and grab something to eat. We love Chinese food, authentic Chinese food. We actually love Asian cuisine in general. So driving past all the restaurants was a mild form of torture for us. We did get to make up for it though during our 4-day visit because, with the guidance of our friend Steve, we had some great dining experiences at Thai, Vietnamese, and Nepalese restaurants located throughout San Francisco. The food scene in this city is no joke and some of the best we've ever had. While this next stop isn't even in the city of San Francisco, it is one of the most memorable stops we made during our trip. And once again, if it weren't for Steve, we never would have seen it. What is it, you ask? Well, it's a redwood, and its name is Methuselah. Methuselah is the oldest and largest living tree in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and it's absolutely massive. Pictures and video will neither do it justice nor convey the feeling one gets when standing before it. It's truly impressive. Methuselah is estimated to be around 1,860 years old. It once stood at 225 feet tall until the top broke off, bringing it down to 137 feet in 1954. It is 45 feet around at its base. Let that sink in for a moment. It is also so tall it was impossible to see the top. Methuselah is definitely one of the most amazing and memorable things we've ever seen. After taking in the magnificent Methuselah, we hiked along the El Corto de Madre Creek Preserve Trail with another redwood in mind. Steve already forewarned us it wasn't nearly as impressive as the gargantuan Methuselah, but that the hike there shouldn't be missed. And he was right. This is a beautiful trail. And that is a banana slug. It doesn't look like he's doing much, but if you look close, he's really moving out. It won't be long now before we reach that second redwood, but honestly, this trail is so beautiful, it doesn't even matter what it does or doesn't look like. And here it is. And yeah, it's not nearly as impressive as Methuselah, but that doesn't mean it isn't impressive. This tree, Methuselah, the trail, and the entirety of the experience was very impressive, and we highly recommend it when in the area. This was definitely one of the highlights of our trip. Okay, so Alcatraz Island is one of those things that's been on our bucket list for a long time, even before we hit the road as full-time RVers. So as soon as we got into the city, we purchased our tickets online. We paid $41 a piece, which includes the ferry ride to and from the island and an audio tour once there. Next to seeing Methuselah, this was probably the second highlight of the trip for me. I've always been a fan of the movie Escape from Alcatraz, a huge fan of Clint Eastwood, and even though I'm a retired cop, I kind of hope Frank Morris and the England brothers survived their escape from the jail, notoriously known as being impossible to escape from. Once on board, we made our way to the top deck and to the front of the ferry in hopes of getting the best view for the ride. And as you can see, everyone else had the same idea too. Fighting for footage, people. The struggle is real. We still had a good view though. Once you arrive at the island, you'll be corralled off the ferry like cattle. This is a tourist attraction after all, and it does get busy. Once you get off the ramp, you'll come to an open courtyard where additional rules and directions will be given. We think this takes about 10 or 15 minutes, but we're not certain since we decided to pass that part and start our tour early. I know, we're such rebels. There is an Alcatraz sign in the courtyard though, which makes for great pictures, so we stopped there first and snapped a couple ourselves. The walk to the main jailhouse stays true to the hilly streets of San Francisco, so wear a comfortable pair of shoes. But as we make our way to the jailhouse, here's a little history of it. The jail was first a military prison in the 1850s. It wasn't until 1933 that the Army relinquished Alcatraz to the U.S. Justice Department, and on July 1st, 1934, the maximum security facility officially opened. And while Alcatraz was a far cry from resort living, its tough-as-nails reputation was a bit of a Hollywood creation. The prison's one-man per cell policy actually appealed to many inmates because they were less likely to be victims of attack by fellow jailbirds. And because Alcatraz's first warden, James A. Johnston, knew that poor food was often the cause of riots, Alcatraz inmates were served good food, and they were allowed as many helpings as they desired. Operationally, Alcatraz was the most expensive prison of any state or federal institution to run, and this was the primary reason for its shutdown in March of 1963. Not the escape of Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers in June of 1962 as believed by many. And into Alcatraz we go. This caged area here is where inmates collected their prison-issued clothing after showering. And this is where they showered. Prisoners knew no privacy here or anywhere else, and they were only allowed 2 showers per week. And this is where the inmates were housed. Cells were divided by blocks. There were good blocks, well, not good per se, just better than others, like D block, which is where prisoners were put into isolation. The cells were tiny, barely big enough for a sink, toilet, single bed, and a very small table. And this is the yard, the only outside time Alcatraz inmates got. Unless they were trying to escape, that is. It's a lot smaller than I thought it would be for some reason. We're now heading into D Block, also known as isolation or the treatment unit. D Block was reserved for unusually dangerous or violent inmates. According to the literature in the jail, men received adequate food and health care but were confined to their cells 24 hours a day. A stretch in D Block could last anywhere from a few days or several years, depending on their offense. Everyone here is looking at pictures of some of the inmates that spent time on D Block. The 6 open doors to the right of this sign are the cells known as the Hole. Inmates with the most severe disciplinary problems were sent here, and punishment sometimes included total darkness and a restricted diet. Time in the Hole usually lasted several days, but never more than 19. It's dark in here with the door open. I imagine total darkness is exactly what the inmates got when the door was closed. This now empty room was the jail's library. Inmates who behaved had access to privileges, including monthly movies and this library, which once held 15,000 books and 75 magazine subscriptions. The philosophy, fiction, and educational books that once filled multiple shelving units in this very room were a mental escape for many inmates. And literate convicts read anywhere between 75 and 100 books a year. I don't know about you, but they've got me beat. I read 1 book last year. And here's another one of those tiny cells. On the right is the visitation area. Inmates sat on one side of the wall and their visitors on the other. And now we're entering the dining hall. Inmates were fed 3 squares a day, and like I mentioned earlier, the food was supposed to actually be pretty good. And in case I failed to mention, or you were wondering because you keep seeing us with masks on, masks are still mandated on the ferry and the island, both inside and out. This is the kitchen where the grub was cooked, and I would imagine that if you were going to make friends with anyone, it would be with the inmates who prepared your food. And like any good tourist attraction, there's a big souvenir/gift shop on your way out. We picked up a couple postcards and a book written by inmate Jim Quillen titled Alcatraz from Inside. While the inmates at Alcatraz didn't have access to the 360 degrees of beauty that surround the island, I still think it's a little ironic that the best views in San Francisco are from a prison. And there is the San Francisco skyline, another great view from the prison. As we head back to the mainland, here's another cool fact about Alcatraz. Alcatraz Island is part of the Golden Gate National Recreation Area, the largest urban national park in the world. With more than 75,000 acres and 28 miles of coastline, the Golden Gate National Recreation Area is nearly 2.5 times the size of San Francisco. Now, don't say you never learned anything from our channel. The ferry ride from the island was a lot rougher and colder than the ride there, so a light jacket is definitely recommended. We're going to be at the pier in just a few minutes, which means our trip to Alcatraz will be ending shortly. But listen, if you're ever in San Francisco and ever thought about visiting Alcatraz, we highly recommend it. The ferry ride alone is worth it, but the island, the jail, and all the history that comes along with it is definitely worth your time. It's hard to explain the feeling you get when you're allowed to freely come and go from a place that people died trying to escape from. And I'm not talking about Frank Morris and the England brothers. 36 inmates in total put the escape-proof Alcatraz to the test, and 23 were captured, 6 were shot to death, and the rest went missing and were presumed to have drowned. So the moral of the story is, jail sucks, so don't go there. We're heading back to the Coast Guard Base RV park, so we're going to drive over the Golden Gate Bridge again, which reminds us, taking the Golden Gate Bridge into San Francisco will cost you $8.60 each time. If you don't have a pass, there is no way for you to pay this at the time you drive through the toll because stopping is not allowed. You will have to go online at bayareafasttrack.org to pay afterwards, and you have a very short time to do this. I believe it's 48 hours. And in case you were wondering, there is no cost to leave San Francisco. It's not just the bridge that's stunning. Much like the ferry ride out to Alcatraz is just as beautiful as the views from the island, the drive to or from this magnificent bridge is just as beautiful as the bridge itself. And as promised, a quick tour of our RV accommodations. The Coast Guard base in Petaluma, California is located off of Tamales Road. It's a short distance from San Francisco, about a 45-minute drive, and only 7 miles from downtown Petaluma, which has everything you need. The base does have an exchange but does not have a commissary, which is one of its several inconveniences in our opinion. We paid $50 a night for electric and water hookups, but there is no sewer connection. The facility does have showers at the gym, but the gym isn't located near the RV park, so driving there is a must. This is the gym coming up on our left. It's also where you check in upon arrival and receive a cable box which will hook you up with lots of channels at your site. The gym is not open 24 hours a day and the hours are not consistent every day, so this is another inconvenience as well. There is a gas station on base with much cheaper fuel prices than out in town, so that's a plus, but there weren't any other amenities we saw other than a coffee shop with very short hours. If we had been staying here every night, this probably would have been a lot more inconvenient than it was, but thanks to Steve, once again, he let us stay with him right there in San Francisco. Okay, so I don't want to make it sound like we didn't enjoy the base at all. While we do think it's a little expensive for the lack of amenities and hookups, it is a very scenic base with its green rolling hills and endless walking paths throughout it. It's centrally located not just to San Francisco, but also Bodega Bay and Point Reyes, and of course downtown Petaluma is very close. This is the dump station on the right, which is free by the way. In just a minute, we'll be at the RV park. And here on the left is the RV park. This RV park is probably the smallest we've ever stayed at, on base or otherwise. There are only 6 sites. But as you can see, the view is pretty awesome. And there is our tiny home. One thing I do want to mention real quick is that there are a lot of ticks right here on the base and in the area, so please make sure your cats and dogs are up to date on their flea and tick monthly preventative medications. Here's a little bit of the driving scenery right outside the base. And this is downtown Petaluma. For a smaller city, the downtown area does not lack. There are several restaurants and retail shopping stores, as well as a river walk and plenty of bars and pubs. Petaluma is a very attractive city, and in addition to having a thriving downtown, there's also several parks with trails located nearby. There's a lot to do here, and we really enjoyed checking it out. So our time in San Francisco is coming to an end. We had a great time and just wish we had another month to explore this beautiful city. There is just way too much to do and see in only a week. But we also got to spend some quality time with great friends, got to see some family members who also live in California, and then enjoyed some much needed downtime in our tranquil little RV spot here on the base.
And that's because in just 2 weeks, we'll be starting our next camp hosting job in San Bernardino National Forest. We've never been there, so we're looking forward to exploring that area as well. We'll miss San Francisco, but it's time to hit the road. And on that note, thanks for watching. Don't forget to give this video a like, hit that notification button, and subscribe to our channel. It all helps what we're doing here. And until next time, we'll catch you down the road.
Bye. Thanks for watching.
Take care now.